Hello everyone, today I want to talk to you about how the EU is following the US in imposing tariffs on Chinese steel, but this could actually cause its own industry to decline rapidly. Moreover, as the saying goes, you do the first day, I'll do the 15th. China is hitting back hard at the EU by restricting the use of European companies' telecom equipment. As a result, interactions are becoming more frequent, but the EU is missing a great opportunity to improve relations with China and is starting to drift further and further away. If President Trump hadn't revealed it himself in advance, it would have been unknown that he is going to meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping at the upcoming APEC summit at the end of the month. He posted on social media saying that soybeans will be one of the main topics of discussion between China and the US. American soybean farmers will be hurt because China is refusing to buy soybeans purely for negotiation purposes. In fact, Trump wasn't wrong. China is indeed using soybeans as a bargaining chip in negotiations with the US. After Trump took office, he arbitrarily imposed a so-called 20% fentanyl tariff on Chinese imports. At that time, China's countermeasures included imposing a 10% tariff on American soybeans. However, we shouldn't underestimate the possibility that China and the US could reach an agreement for China to resume purchasing American soybeans. As long as the US agrees to lower the so-called fentanyl tariff, China wouldn't mind buying American soybeans. I think there's still no chance of entering this kind of rapid transaction model because both sides are acting out of practical considerations, not like the EU, which is currently... While EU Commission President von der Leyen is still foolishly acting according to his ideals and trying to please Trump, China is starting to be aggressive with the EU. According to a Financial Times report on the 12th, China is restricting the use of Nokia and Vericom equipment in its domestic telecom networks. The Financial Times stated that Xi Jinping, a nationalist, is promoting China's key technological infrastructure and its withdrawal from the West. China is restricting its own networks from using products from European telecom equipment suppliers Nokia of Finland and Vericom of Sweden. Two supporters said that telecom equipment buyers across China, including mobile network operators, military enterprises, and other industries, have begun to more closely scrutinize foreign bids for telecom equipment projects. These review procedures require Ericsson and Nokia to submit bid documents to Chinese cybersecurity authorities for review, and they will not tell European companies how to evaluate this review, which is conducted by the authoritative technology giant, which may take up to 3 months or even longer. Even if European companies are finally approved, the long and uncertain review process puts them at a disadvantage when bidding. Chinese telecom competitors that are not subject to review will have an advantage. Reports say that this cannot help but restrict Europe's recognized business practices. Many European governments have previously warned against cooperating with Chinese telecom giants Huawei and ZTE, but the Financial Times said that these have limited impact on Chinese companies' market share in Europe. China launched the National Security Review at a time when Xi Jinping is promoting independent innovation. The strategic goal is to completely replace foreign technology. As early as 2022, after the revision of China's cybersecurity law, Beijing eliminated European equipment. Preparations are deepening. New laws require operators of critical information infrastructure to submit any equipment they purchase that could pose a security risk to the National Cybersecurity Commission for review. Pengas, an analyst at the research institute Dao Luo, said Beijing's increasingly stringent disinfection restrictions have caused the combined market share of mobile networks of Russia and Nokia to drop from 12% in 2020 to 4% this year. Both companies reported a decline in revenue in China, with Nokia's revenue in China showing a several percentage point decline starting in 2023. Insiders say the approval process is so slow that European companies can only gain a meager market share in large bids, which often go to Chinese suppliers. The European Chamber of Commerce in China said the information technology and telecommunications industries are in a state of decline. The demands of internationalization pose an existential threat to European technology groups. A recent survey by the Chamber of Commerce shows that nearly 430 respondents said the restrictions have already led to business losses. The Financial Times, however, overstated Europe's restrictions on Huawei, saying that European policymakers have raised security concerns about Chinese telecom suppliers, but many countries have been slow to implement bans, both because of the low cost of Chinese telecom equipment and because they fear such actions would anger Beijing. Data shows that since the EU urged member states to ban so-called high-risk suppliers like Huawei and ZTE 5 years ago, as of June this year, only 10 of the 27 EU countries have implemented such restrictions. Second, Australian data shows that Huawei and ZTE still hold a 30% market share in Europe's mobile communications infrastructure, minus 35%, a mere 5 to 10 percentage point decrease compared to 2020. It can be summarized this way. First, Europe already implemented restrictions on Chinese telecommunications equipment in the first place, while China is only now implementing 15. Europe's actions to restrict Huawei and other Chinese telecom companies are not as understated as the Financial Times suggests. Among Australia's three major countries, the UK has completely banned Huawei from participating in the UK's 5G network construction and requires the gradual removal of existing Huawei equipment by 2027, the most stringent of all countries. While France has not completely excluded Huawei, it will restrict Huawei's participation in key facilities to a limited extent, choosing other telecommunications equipment suppliers. Germany has relaxed its grip slightly. There was once discussion of outright restrictions on Huawei, but under the new government's policies, the restriction of using equipment from trusted countries has been lifted, focusing instead on trusted technical standards. This indicates that Huawei still has a chance to participate in Germany's 5G network construction. Europe has taken the lead in restricting Chinese telecom companies. How can China not do the same? Second, in the past, China acted quietly, but now it is not afraid to act openly or to be tough with Europe, mainly because the EU is too foolish. After Trump came to power, the EU still threw itself completely into the arms of the United States, so China is also unafraid to let things play out in public, waiting for European business circles to pressure the EU to stop siding with the US and making foolish decisions again. And the latest foolish thing the EU wants to do is to follow the US in imposing tariffs on Chinese steel. On October 1st, the Financial Times also quoted people familiar with the matter as saying that the European Union plans to follow the example of the United States and Canada and take action against Chinese steel imports. According to two people familiar with the talks, an emergency meeting was held on October 1st. The European Union's Industrial Strategy Commissioner Zeisenberg promised industry executives and unions that the European Union would cut foreign steel import quotas to half the level in 2024 and referred to the United States, Japan and Canada. The move significantly increased tariffs, imposing a maximum 50% tariff on imported steel. It is reported that as part of Trump's industrial reshoring plan, the United States has already imposed a 50% tariff on imported steel. Canada has also recently implemented import restrictions on steel from countries that have not signed a free trade agreement with it. Another event was that European Union Industrial Strategy Commissioner Zeiter said at the meeting that the new regulations would not set a time limit, which means there is no expiration date. This is consistent with the current safeguard measures, which expire next year and impose a 25% tariff, are different. He also specifically mentioned China, saying the European Union must not continue to be naive. We reject unlimited market access to foreign individual production capacity and the dumping prices that result from large-scale subsidies. However, the new regulations still need to be approved by a majority vote of the European Parliament and European Union recognizing countries. Although France and 10 other recognizing countries have proposed implementing the measure, some countries remain concerned that it could fuel domestic inflation and weaken the competitiveness of gasoline product manufacturers. The European Automobile Manufacturers Association, representing automakers, has already warned of the impact of the measure and called for it to be made temporary and reassessed after a period of time. Last week, Germany also expressed caution about the measures. Klingbein, former vice-chancellor and finance minister, he said he actually supports free trade and opposes protectionism, but then changed his tone and said that considering the industrial policies of both China and the United States, we should not be naive. The Financial Times report also mentioned that the European Union hopes this approach will satisfy Washington. The European Union is taking action to prevent China from reducing its market share in exchange for not reducing tariffs on the European Union. Earlier this month, President Ursula von der Leyen leaked that the decline in profits caused by the slowdown in global overcapacity will make it more difficult for the European steel industry to promote decarbonization investment. The European Commission will propose new steel import restrictions to protect domestic steel producers. First, the European Union can be said to have launched a series of moves to follow the United States' desire to impose steel tariffs. It wants to please the United States while also accepting the European Union's impoverished steel industry lobbying. However, saving the steel industry will kill the auto industry. The United States has set a precedent. Bosidian Consulting estimates that the increase in steel and aluminum tariffs will increase costs for American users by $52.6 billion, impacting all industries in the United States, especially the automotive and aircraft manufacturing industries. An estimated 50% steel and aluminum tariff could increase the cost of each American car by nearly $2,000. The situation in Europe is actually very similar. The tax increase is to rescue the European steel industry, which is a hopeless bean. But the increase in steel costs will accelerate the industry's demise. The automotive industry bears the brunt of the Sino-United States competition. Secondly, the United States has cheap energy costs, While China has strong manufacturing capabilities, they have mutual advantages, but Europe has high energy costs and declining manufacturing capabilities. The industry has always been under great pressure, and now if it wants to follow the United States down the dead end of protectionism, it will decline even faster than the United States. Europe's biggest problem now is the lack of true leadership, and therefore lacks strategic thinking and cannot find a way out for the country.